Joining me now, former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, and News Corp columnist Angela Mollard. Great to have you both with us. Bronwyn, you know more about drafting legislation and amended bills and voting in the House and what's going to happen in the Senate. This is a wide-ranging, complicated, major change, with some arguing it will be a danger to free speech. Is it being rushed too quickly?
Certainly it is. And my view of the bill, as it is presently constituted, is that it should be rejected. It is an affront to freedom of speech. You know, freedom of speech is something that is inherent in a democracy, and it's a Western culture concept. It came through Magna Carta, up through the Bill of Rights of 1688, the writings of Milton, the Enlightenment, and it is J.S. Mill. It's come to us as an important pillar of maintaining a democracy. And to rush through this piece of legislation, which is amalgamated material which doesn't relate to each other, simply so that the government, in its cynical way, knows it can find division for the National Party and, of course, One Nation over the question of guns, because they say quite rightly that they are going to make normal, law-abiding citizens pay for the guilty actions of the terrorists. So it is a mishmash, but there's nothing accidental about it. This bill has taken a good deal of time to draft. It goes through a lot of stages to come to the exposure draft. The explanatory memorandum takes a long time to put together. And so this time that the Prime Minister has been saying, oh, we might have a Royal Commission or we might come back, he has been behind the scenes crafting what he knows will be a disastrous bill, and it should be rejected.
Angela, I speculated at the start of the program that, I mean, obviously the Prime Minister needed to change the narrative, to get the arguments away from him not calling a Royal Commission and him not, being strong enough to react straight after Bondi. You suspect with what Bronwyn said there, and when you look at this, that might in fact be the case.
And that's right, Steve. Look, there is reacting and then there's being reactive. And I think he's being that at the moment. He is trying to formulate policy from a place of grief, and actually it needs clear-headedness. I really like what a British lawyer has said overnight. He said that laws written in the heat of an outrage become rights lost in the cold light of day. And he goes on to say that he's a free speech lawyer. He says free speech isn't the enemy of social harmony, it's the foundation of social harmony. And I think at the moment what's happening with this legislation, and the fact, as Bronwyn mentioned, that it's all being rolled into one piece together with the gun laws, which of course are a regional and a city issue, quite different approaches to that, is that it's too much at once. It's confusing, but more to the point, it's not driving us in the direction that we want, which is cohesion at the moment rather than division.
Well, there's certainly going to be a heap of division when everybody gets back to Canberra. I note Liberal MP Andrew Hastie this afternoon, Bronwyn, has shared on social media that he'll be voting no to the changes. Here's what he had to say.
I'll be voting no to this bill. I'll be voting against it for two main reasons. The first is this bill is an attack on our basic democratic freedoms: freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. But secondly, the Prime Minister is showing absolute contempt for normal parliamentary process. For a bill of this size, we would normally take a few months to consider it. It would go into a committee process and the public would have an opportunity to make submissions. There would be public hearings. MPs and senators would debate it and they would consider fully the unintended consequences of this bill. Instead, the Prime Minister has reduced that process to a couple of days.
Well, Bronwyn, Andrew's basically saying there what you said. So how does the new Liberal leader, Susan Lee, now handle this? Because she's got people splintering all over the place. What does she need to do next week?
She needs them to pull them all together and vote no. And the reason I say that is that the Liberal Party, the coalition generally, is bleeding to One Nation. And the reason that it's bleeding is because One Nation is presenting a case which is clear, concise and consistent. And this is seen to be the coalition dithering. Now, I think Susan Lee has done a very good job through this appalling time that we've gone through. She's been strong and she's been morally courageous. But on this particular issue, this bill is a travesty. Everything that was said by Andrew about the length of time that a bill of this size would normally take, but it has been deliberately contrived to put it together to cause argument and discourse, which will, the Labor Party hopes, put the opposition into ill repute because they're not agreeing with what they're saying is going to be the solution. There is one question and one question only that needs to be answered both in legislation and in the Royal Commission, and that is, how did we get to the situation where two alleged radical Islamists hunted Jewish and other people who were attending, but mainly Jewish, at a Jewish function, to kill them in the name of religion? How did we get to that stage? That's what we want to know, because then we can determine how to stop it.
Yes, and of course, I mean, those allegations are all going to be tested in court, and we'll see where that goes. Angela, I note the Trump administration's given Labor a slap over the new laws themselves. Senior US State Department official Sarah Rogers believing that they could lead to, quote, deeply perverse outcomes. I mean, we are saying here that the administration of the Albanese government is so cynical that they're going to use this not to bring the nation together, which is what the Prime Minister's constantly saying. This is about social cohesion. I can't see this creating any social cohesion.
That's right. And what the point she makes is that you can critique jihadists and find yourself with fairly severe consequences for that. But as a jihadist, you can quote from the Quran or whatever document you like, and you are safe. Now, as Andrew Hastings mentioned, there are so many potential unintended consequences from this hate speech legislation. And we've seen that play out magnificently, well, you know, with huge consequences in the UK, where ordinary people making criticisms online, a small tweet, that sort of thing, have found themselves in prison for 12-month sentences, that sort of thing. If you think about it, under the new legislation, Israel Folau, who of course was thrown out of the Wallabies for his hate speech, would have had a different consequence under these new laws. So you have to think really carefully about where they will land and how they will impact ordinary people if you push ahead with them.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're all for free speech and people say some stupid things, but we can then argue it, we can talk about it, we can discuss why what they said was stupid. I mean, we had Green Senator Marine Faruqi today, yet again, slamming the government's decision to invite Israel's President Isaac Herzog last month after the Bondi terror attack. Well, we disagree with her. He should come, but it's her right, Bronwyn, to say that that's what she believes, that he shouldn't be here.
That's what freedom of speech is. And, you know, it's very ironical if you go back through history. When the printing press was invented and suddenly all sorts of information was disseminated, the Pope tried to shut it down because he didn't want contradicting views out there. It took a lot of effort to fight back for freedom of speech to get where it is and open up freedom for the individual. And we can't let it go. We just can't let it go. Yes, she's entitled to her freedom of speech, and we can speak back and say, no, you're not entitled to. And no, you cannot say that he can't come and expect that to be acted upon. But you can make the statement that you don't want him to come. That's an argument that is fair to have. But we've got to realise that Starmer is a leftist socialist Prime Minister, and this is what you get. Socialists always clamp down on freedom of information. And it's interesting, again, if you go back into history, in 1934, when H.G. Wells went to see Stalin and said to him, I don't think you're quite ready for the freedom of speech here yet. I mean, the reality is that socialists don't want freedom of speech. And this Prime Minister is a socialist from the far left of the Labor Party and does not want freedom of speech.
Great to catch up with you both, Bronwyn Bishop, Angela Mollard. Thank you very much for joining me.